So, Mr. McGill, would you like to review the agenda, please, sir?
Absolutely. Tonight's agenda, we have a consideration for the award of contracts with Axon Enterprise, replacement of police in-car cameras and body worn cameras. The chief was here back in November talking about that. We have the consideration to purchase firefighter protective clothing. This is the normal replacement for our career firefighters. We have the consideration of appointments to municipal boards, one for civic engagement, one for resiliency, one for financial management, and then we have the consideration of commencement of pension benefits for 2 employees who are retired.
Thank you. It sounds utterly fascinating. Mr. McCreary. Oh, look, you're here already.
I am.
Good for you. Boy, I'll tell you, Johnny on the spot. The floor is yours.
Floor is mine. Thank you. Thank you, Commission, for giving me the opportunity to present this evening. It's my annual report to the Commission about Mount Lebanon finances. As I state every year, this is not just a snapshot in time. We do this all year long, so we will be reporting back to you as needed and during budget time. So this is just for right now, and we're going to have discussions as we go through this presentation today. But all in all, the year end for 2023 finished up pretty well for the Mount Lebanon municipality. Just to make sure those watching at home, the annual comprehensive financial report, which is the big financial report document, is available on the website. That was released here mid-April. We just got it up to the website today. Also, our popular annual financial report will be coming out in the May 2024 Mount Lebanon Magazine. That's more of a condensed, more palatable version for most people to read. But I encourage anybody to read both in conjunction. So both are award-winning documents. So we've won awards for them for many, many years, and they're a pride of this municipality of what we do. So for 2023, first we're going to go over fund balance. So where did we end up fund balance wise? Let me see if I can move these. Fund balance wise, we ended at 16.2% of general fund expenditures. We always have the goalpost by ordinance of 12 to 15% to stay within those goalposts. We have exceeded those goalposts for a couple of years now. Last year we ended at 16.1%. The amount of unassigned fund balance did increase, but also our expenditures increased too. So, 16.2%. A discussion that we like to have that we'll maybe have at the end of this meeting is how, if the commission has any desire to look to appropriate some of that excess fund balance within the guideline. So for that discussion purpose, every 1% over and above is about 439,000. So if anybody has any questions on those. So that's where our fund balance ended up for 2023. Talk about major revenue sources, real estate taxes. Again, in 2023, we had no tax increase, whereas the prior year we did. And we still maintained above 98% collection rate through January of 2024. We also collect for the school district. We collect them as well over 95%. So I sound like a dead horse, or beating a dead horse here, that Mount Lebanon taxpayers pay their taxes. We're very lucky and fortunate within our boundaries to have such good tax collection rate. Part and parcel to us, I would say, is the way we collect it. I think we have a very good office. I will be biased to say that, but all in all, our taxpayers are very diligent in making sure their taxes are paid. 2024, with the budget, we decreased taxes to 4.5 mils. But as we move forward into 2024, we've already seen some of our streamlining of payments for stormwater and solid waste fee collection. That same system will also be used for tax collection for both the school district and the municipality. So we're excited to do that. It's going to mirror similar to the way you see at the county, where you don't need to log in, you don't need anything. You can go see your taxes if they're paid and pay them immediately. All that will be available come June 1st. So we're inching closer. We're almost there, and it'll be here before we know it. For real estate taxes. Earned income taxes, all collections exceeded the prior year by about $350K. This was trending all year in this direction. We budgeted conservatively. At the end of 22 for 23, we appropriated some of the excess we knew were coming. We appropriated that within the 2023 budget as a use of fund balance. So we knew that was coming. And so that 354,000 was trending all year. In all the reports that you were getting from our tax office, it was trending at about that number, a little bit over 2% for it. Year-over-year cash collections remained very strong, and to say that the increase was in current year collections is a very good sign for 2024. Is that our collections really increased not in prior year collections, so things for in 2023 that were 22 and prior, it was really in 23. So we should see some of that increased side for some prior year collections this year, and then hopefully we have increased current year collections as well. So all good news there on that end. Another one that's come up before is real estate transfer taxes. We hit budget this year. Is we projected where we were. We're about $100,000 less than we were in the prior year, but that was expected. We knew that was coming. We started seeing in the latter part of 2022 and in 23, as we started to see with inflation, mortgage rates, and overall, we started to see the number of sales and transfers per month slowing. But that doesn't mean the price of the home went down. So that helped pick it up. And so we're about 2.1 million, and we're budgeted thereabouts in 2024 as well. So we're seeing a consistent kind of steadying at that number, but we'll report back to the commissioners any changes.
10% in the number of residential.
Right.
Money.
Yeah. The sales taxes, we had another strong year with the inflation numbers. We continue, and we recognize this in the 2024 budget. We kind of stopped at we stopped that conservative number, and we pumped it up a little bit in the 2024 budget to recognize what we were seeing, which was by year end, we were about $105,000 over budget.
One more question, Andrew, the 534 and 397, the 397 is that the average or the median price of the sales?
Average.
It is the average.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes,
And
for
the,
anything over $50,000.
and the 14 mil on the 13 commercial?
That's total.
Total, okay.
Total, correct. Yeah, total commercial transfer was $14 million. Yeah. Other noted revenue, as the commission saw and was apprised of, the ice rink had a issue with their compressor. So there was a short period of time where there was some scrambling that was done to make sure that we could keep the ice rink open as long as we could. That was effective. As you can see, the overall ice center revenues were only down 16K for the year. Yes, we're putting in some money and getting our compressors back up to where they need to be in 2024. But the mitigation efforts to keep the rink open really did work. So kudos to David and his staff to make sure that recreation was there. Other small variances did accumulate to about a $33,000 variance, negative variance in recreation, but that can happen. It's nothing to be alarmed over or anything like that, but recreation does a great job of managing their funds and by function. They really do a good job of making sure they pay attention to it. Investment earnings.
There's a certain weather dependency.
There's weather dependency.
Is it the pool open, the pool not
Correct.
open?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That sounds like a veteran commissioner if I've ever heard it. We may have heard that every now and then. So another big one of variance for us is our investment earnings increased over 68K due to market rates maintaining at a high level. So real kudos to my staff of making sure that we were properly invested and we made quite a considerable amount of money. This is just for the general fund. The sanitary sewer fund or the sewage fund made a considerable amount in their idle cash. So it was a nice strong year for investment earnings all around. To Commissioner Grella, who likes to pay attention to the cable franchise fees, I make sure to put this in there. It maintained at the 22 level.
Is that just due to the renegotiation of the contract or no?
I don't really see it there, just kind of flatlined.
Okay.
Wasn't decreasing anymore.
I thought it was like,
We're
it was likely to
currently-
have just flatlined.
Yeah.
Currently in negotiations with Comcast for their
cable.
And I know they're trying to push legislation that would remove them even from any streaming stuff.
We're trying to go the other direction to get that stuff included.
Yeah. Now switching gears to expenditure variances. Personnel is our biggest cost, right? It's something we have to pay attention to. Our variances this year were just due to lack of bodies, right? So there were some, there, in the core departments that we have, one being, biggest being the police, is while we may not have had those bodies, we still need to fill those shifts. So while there's a variance on full-time wages because people aren't here, we had to backfill that with overtime wages. So what is a variance? Still a positive variance when you net the two out. Not to say that's a good thing. I'm not stating one way or the other. It just is what it is to do. So we also had in the Public Works Department, we had a full year of a variance there of a full-time position not being available to be filled as well. So that contributed to the variance as well. Also in part-time wages, we had some variances in my department. We were able to, as part of the cooperative, backfill, so we didn't need to rehire a part-timer. Crossing guards, we always struggle for filling posts and having substitutes and making sure we have everybody there. So there's some variances there. We also had some variances within the recreation department as well, so.
On the police side, at one point, we were down like 6 officers, right? That's pretty much filled now, is
We're
that
back
correct?
up,
Okay.
Yeah, we have 45 currently.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's part of that, I would imagine, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yep. And part of that too is that while we may hire them, they either go to the academy, some of them for 6 months, we don't have them. But when they come back, they got FTO training for 3 months. So there could be a 9-month window from hire to on the road filling those. And so that's
It's like
why.
a good part of 23 where we had
Yes.
those out, yeah.
Correct, correct. Contractual services, we had a lot of carryovers this year, with the largest being traffic calming.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We really need to thank the police because that's a lot of, I mean, I know they get overtime, but that's a lot of shift coverage
it is.
when you're 6 people. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's right.
it is.
You know,
It's true. Well, and people that are in normal functions had to switch to patrol to make sure we were covered,
Mhm.
right? So there was a commitment to, okay, we're gonna make sure this works and everyone's covered in MLM, and that's kudos to them. You're right.
Yeah.
sorry.
For sure. Just moving on to contractual services, you know, there were some large things that, weren't done in 2023 that were carried to 2024. Traffic calming at the Holly Crest, we budgeted for that, the
Yes.
Holly Crest
Yeah.
Cedar, project. Building improvements, the finalization of the, firing range and those types of things. Ice rink repair, so we budgeted for those carried over, we haven't spent those dollars yet, but we budgeted for them to make sure that when the compressors are finished. And about the inspection software, we haven't
Right.
paid anything for that just
Yeah.
yet, so that's being implemented now.
Right.
So those are all things that, you know, really went into that $403,000 variance. Other variances in commodities, again, these are just, especially on equipment, just we aren't receiving the equipment. It's sometimes taking a year to get the equipment. So we may order it in February, we don't get it to the following February. Well, that'll show up on the 2024 books, those types of things. One nice positive was fuel savings. Fuel prices stabilized in 2023. So we budgeted higher with not knowing where the fuel prices were going. So we did have a nice positive variance there as well.
Just in terms of like the large dump truck, I am working with agencies that are now saying they have 29-month delays. How are you accounting for large equipment like that and planning for that and then funding it? It's got to go into the CIP for some of these big things. You need it in year 3, but you're not going to get it until year 5 if you wait till year 3. How do you think about that?
There's a couple things to think about. One is the large dump truck side of it. We do a very good job of having a good rotation. That rotation may need to be adjusted in that we order one and do an off year to make sure that we cover during this time frame. So that is going to be discussed as we move forward to make sure that we appropriate it so that if it is a 29th month lead time, it's really the bigger purchases, which are fire trucks is going to be a big one. The next fire truck, if this continues, I was talking to Dormont today. They're not getting theirs till 2026. Right, and they ordered it in 2022. They're not getting it until 2026. So there's some big considerations to talk about when it comes to, plus the price is now increased as well significantly. So the vehicle rotation is going to absolutely be looked at during the CIP process, but also during the vehicle committee that we're reestablishing because of these types of things. So we'll report back to you on that. and how it, because I can't sit here and answer how it's gonna affect Rudy or how it's gonna affect Jason or so on and so forth. We're aware of that, and I think we're bringing those people together and those that need to be in the room, to see how we can properly manage that in the future.
And I'd add that we also do a very good job of, especially with Rudy, for Public Works vehicles of, I'll say, the maintenance logs. So we know when we start to reach a point where we're making significant investments in the
Yes,
vehicle.
yes.
So we've got some lead time in terms of, it's not like if we expect to have something in 2024, if it doesn't get here, we're not down a vehicle. We're able to maintain what we have until the next vehicle gets here. So,
All right, so getting back to our, now, all that revenues over expenditures, you then have a change in fund balance. So we had a positive, positive variance in the change in fund balance. And that's due to the carryover. So there were a lot of expenditures that we just haven't done yet, that will be coming to, but those are all accounted within your fund balance. So you're still at 16.2% even with those carryovers, all those different types of things. So that was a nice positive variance. This happens year over year. So if that number ever exceeds it, then you've got a problem. And I would be here way before this time if that were ever to be a problem. Hint, hint.
Thank you.
Nod, nod. But that does happen every year, and I should be reporting this to you for it. So what are we watching in 2024? Not much different than 2023, but there are a few items I would like to highlight. First three we talked about last year. Next is real estate tax appeals, is really the one we're gonna have to. To date, from 6/1 of last year, so June 1st of last year till today, through April 30th. We had $155,000 in refunds issued for,
Top line tax revenues
top line tax revenue, $155,000 return
in the last year.
in the last year.
Okay. Because of court cases.
Of appeals, yes,
Appeals.
appeals coming back. So, our big commercial properties have appealed and they've won, or they've been given exonerations. Galleria being our largest taxpayer, they've gotten both of their parcels have gotten exonerations. There's issues with, some have exemptions, being a tax exempt property, but there's been some other commercial, the hotel being one, so on and so forth. So there's been some activity, within our I don't want to hide from it. I'm just telling you that we can absorb it right now. But we're continually monitoring the real estate situation. We're going to investigate what makes the most sense moving forward. How do we approach this? Do we start appearing at hearings? We're going to be discussing all those different types of things once we get notice. And do we do any proactive measures as well? To make sure that we're ready for that. As everyone probably saw in the news, the Pittsburgh Public Schools are suing Allegheny County. So this may be a moot point and there may be a lot of action coming soon, within the next 2 to 3 years. So, we'll be watching that though. So if anybody has any questions as we move forward into this next tax year, please let us know.
It's good just be kept up to date. Like I think I sent an email about the top line numbers, and I would imagine just by nature of, we have a lot less, like the down properties, the office, some of the brick and mortar retail.
Yeah.
We have some of that, but not a ton of that. Certainly not as much as a percentage of stock as, say, Pittsburgh, where it's probably gonna be a huge hit for them. So I would expect that we wouldn't get hit as hard, but it'd still be good to know, like, hey, if we get hammered here, what's the number we're looking at? And we have to start thinking about that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So,
The sad part is we have some commercial property owners and even some large nonprofit property owners that I think do the right thing and understand that they're being good stewards of our community by, working with us on some of that stuff. So, maybe that's part of the proactive you're talking about for some of them.
and I think too, it's a lot of it's out of our hands at a certain point, right? There is but because there's 3 taxing bodies and so on and so forth. But it hasn't affected our budget at this time, but it is something we're watching. Next thing is capital needs. Within this commission, we've noticed, obviously, as a finance department, that there are capital needs coming. Recreation department, having their rec center possibly a $12 million clip-ish. The South Garage, those types of things. We see capital needs are coming, so we want to make sure we're prepared. So we've been looking at those types of things, and that dovetails into bond considerations. So as we progress through this year, I think we need to talk about bond issues
Yeah.
and how those come into play. You know, the capacity, just so the commission's aware, I know some, Jeff, I know you're a little bit newer commissioner. We have some debt falling off next year. It's about 350K in debt service payments. So there is some capacity for a smaller debt issuance between the $5 and $6 million without any effect on, right? We could absorb a $5 to $6 million bond issue with our current debt service structure. We've run those numbers. Current bond rates are similar to when we had a year ago, so around this time, so on and so forth. As we start to get to talk about bigger numbers, the capacity and where we get that from is going to need to be talked about. Whether that be in a revenue or a real estate millage structure. Back in 2017, I'll remind, we went out for the Public Works facility and we increased mills to 1.2 mills to specifically cover that debt service. In 5 years, that debt service is falling off. So we're not far away from
Right.
it falling, our debt service really falling off a cliff, and we can get more into that as we go, but those considerations are here. We're aware of them. We want to make sure we're out in front of it for you. So as we move forward with those, we're going to be here for you to talk about.
Just in the conversation we had about the South Garage, whichever way we go with that in terms of how it gets redeveloped, what, you know, the meeting we had was basically 20 months from when we say,
Yeah.
let's start figuring it out to when we probably know what it looks like. So that's a pretty good gap.
And what we may want to engage early is a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Early.
Yeah.
And that will help shepherd us so that they're aware of how it's moving across, along. So that if we do wrap other things like when we do the Big South Garage project
Right.
and we do a rec center at the same time, they're fully aware of our entire picture as we move along.
How do we do that? Do you just make a recommendation of who?
We go out for an RFP on a financial advisor. We can interview them and do those types of things.
Yeah.
A day job.
We can't do
No, I cannot. And I don't want to.
There are plenty of good ones in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania
Yes,
and
there are.
around that will be absolutely interested. There are some, our neighboring community, they pay their financial advisor every year regardless if they do an issuance. To make sure they're ready at any point to do it. Yeah. So we're ready, we're aware.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that's not a discussion for tonight, but just want to make sure that it's on our.
Through the rest of this year and finalize out some of the other studies.
Yeah.
We'll develop a list of potential projects with
Sure.
cost
Price
estimates
tags,
so that then it will be up to the commission to sort of prioritize and we can develop associated
Yeah.
timelines
Probably
So
so
that-
back in the budget, knowing.
so that we can move that sort of bond structure
Right.
forward,
Yeah.
whether it's in 2 issuances or see what the impact. is.
In my experience, when we've had windfalls, we look back and go, hey, we kind of planned for that. Like through COVID, it was like, hey, we came out okay. And it's like, yeah, because staff was talking about it
Yeah.
2 years ahead of time. So like, I think
Yeah.
the more we can plan and talk about it, the better we'll
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, there's still people that still haven't spent their ARPA money. Right? So like, we're planning way ahead before other communities. So yes, you're right. So considerations as we talk about through this budget through the budget process. There were only a couple from the budget process that were kind of the non-personnel related. I know some personnel related discussions are happening
Yeah.
with the social services coordinator. But these were the other items within the budget that were not personnel related that were on the chopping block, so to speak. So I just want to make sure those were out in front of you.
Meaning these are
for-
ones that you think may need funding?
No, they were on the list and just were cut. This is what I do every year to say here, just to remind you, bring you back to when you were budgeting 5 months ago.
Take us back in time.
Take you back in time. This is what was left. So there wasn't much. Last year, this
Yeah,
was a
right.
complete list. There was,
Okay.
10 items on it maybe. So there wasn't really much because I think we know we're planning for bigger things coming. And
It seems like the children's library painting as well, that's being paid for by grants.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I think the children's library painting is being paid for by a grant. Robin?
We have some donated funds that we're using for our library project. We're still in the planning stages.
Okay. Okay.
so, any other questions?
No, I think you do a great job. It's so lucky to be a commissioner, wink, wink.
No,
Looking
no.
at this than some other cases.
Yes. Well, I will say, we'll be ready, when that time comes for, use of unassigned fund balance, if those projects do come this year. For those discussions to be had, and how we want to structure that. As a reminder of projects in years
Right.
past, we've talked about seeding some projects through
Right.
unassigned fund balance.
Right.
Those can be done. We'll be ready for you at those times, just as an example. So, again, thank you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Thanks.
Look at that, 3 minutes ahead of time too. Wow. Okay, Civil Service Board, Chief Haberman and Dan Garfunkel. Dinkles, all right, say Garfunkel. Get that a lot, I know. Just say.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate that. So with, I'll just introduce sort of the overall, just the civil service meeting we
Yeah.
had, and we can get into the details, I guess, with Dan and I moving forward. So the Civil Service Board, has been a while since we met.
Mhm.
And so whenever we had a couple of new members this past year, both Chief Tahada and I felt it best that we revisit our civil service rules and really just go and do a deep dive and really see where we were at. And if you look through, I know you have those included in your
Yep.
packets. You'll see a lot of the things that we looked at, we really identified were just dated,
Language.
words dated, you can see it was all a lot of, again,
Gender.
misuse of it was always he and they, there was no real gender neutral pronouns in terms of what was in there, in terms of a lot of the positions weren't identified in the fire department. The assistant chief of fire had not ever been even identified in the civil service rules. It was a developed position that the chief had, again, hired for since 2014 when the last rules were updated. So that's where we were at. That's what we felt was important. We looked at it. We really wanted to go in. And there was some other things in there that if you look through, you'll see we felt important in terms of promotability and the promotional process. You'll see a few changes there. And I guess from a legal standpoint, Dan, if you want to add anything in terms of high level legal updates that were made.
Sure, so these rules have state law implications and they have to comply with state law, which requires certain provisions to be in there. And as the state law changes, rules need to change as well. So I'll just give two examples without getting too into it. But a 2020 law made a central registry for police terminations, for instance. So if a police officer is terminated,
Everybody knows.
that is logged in a central location. Also, there's just changes to things like the process for disqualification of applicants is another thing that was added. But that goes along with the general gender neutral changes, whereas it used to say he, the rules would now say the applicant, for instance. This is common, this is happening everywhere, not just here.
But there's no problem on that last part, right? Like we don't run up against any state law where we can make those pronoun gender neutral changes without an issue.
No, it's not an issue. It's in fact, like I said, it's consistent with, I think, what municipalities are doing because, it is, it's not, in some ways, it's not substantive, in other ways, it's very substantive.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's,
We had DEI committees that worked for a year on, we made changes to police policies with
right.
certain things which were great and very well received by the municipality, by residents.
So we wanted to make that consistent. We did that throughout. So you'll see that if you look through there, you'll
Yeah.
notice those changes made to reflect that. And again, I think it really brings us up to speed. I think the Civil Service Board received the changes well. We had a healthy discussion about the changes in terms of the content. And so it was very informative. I think they all walked away very informed and we felt more comfortable with the, again, just completeness of the changes. So there was a couple of other changes with respect to Deputy Chief of Police was noted, but not really covered. So that was also sort of clarified. And again, more clarified language was the other part. So I think that you now have an updated, complete guideline for civil service rules. The civil service members feel comfortable. I know the chief and I feel comfortable with it in terms of moving forward with the promotional processes and hiring processes. You know, as we go through these changes with recruitment and retention, I imagine we'll continue to revisit these a lot more frequently than since 2014. I think that we're gonna start to see things that we identify, whether it's testing processes that are more global, whether it's statewide or even larger. These are things that, you know, the chief and I talk about often. And so as we start to see those changes develop, we'll obviously keep the civil service rules updated to reflect those things as well.
Great.
I'll just add a couple other ones because the chief and I started talking about this really probably back in January of 23.
Yeah.
When you first transitioned into the position. Because we really hadn't done any updates, and in addition to the ones that have already been mentioned, when we had a conversation with the fire department, one of the other changes is the fire department requested the ability to extend their eligibility
Yes.
list from 12 to 18 months.
Right.
So that was incorporated, which I think is important to them. There were some changes in terminology. In 2014, we didn't have an assistant fire chief.
Right.
So, and even some of the other, I'll say, identifiers that we use per contract for fire were not reflected in the civil service rules and regs. So again, a change that and updates that needed to be done. Also, one of the things that Jason and I sort of jointly put on our list of goals to get accomplished for this year. I think the board was very appreciative of the meeting. They did meet on the 18th. They did make a motion to adopt the changes that passed 3-0. So the next steps is this will appear probably on your first meeting in May
Okay.
as a resolution
Okay.
to be approved by the commission,
Mhm.
at which point the new rules and regulations will take effect. The only other one that I don't think anybody mentioned was a number of years ago, we had made some changes to our physical qualifications for officers. We made those changes right before there was a challenge that the standards that we had been using, which again, were widely used, were determined to be discriminatory against female applicants. Because they didn't accurately reflect, I'll say, what was required in terms of being an officer on the job. So,
Sure.
but that's also been incorporated into here as well. So,
Yep. And I think that the important to add that with what manager said is we reflected now what the academy requires and the state requires. So we now have that vetting process through the state, through the academy. We use the academy as our baseline. We put people through the academy, so that should really stay consistent. As those changes are made within the state and with Allegheny County Police Academy, we will stay consistent and reflect those changes, which is how it's worded here. So I think that'll help us out moving forward.
Sounds good. Question? Concerns, thoughts? Nothing.
Thank you.
Sign, you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, Ian, Woodland sidewalks.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm back again to talk about sidewalks. So just as a brief recap, last year, the commission adopted changes to the sidewalk policy. That policy was originally approved in 2013, so updates came a decade later. Basically about how sidewalks could go about getting installed, how residents in interested neighborhoods could file petitions, get their names on the list for potential consideration. All of that. As part of that update to the policy, the commission directed Gateway to conduct a TSL type size location analysis on 7 different streets around the municipality that information was provided at subsequent discussion sessions by Gateway to the commission. And then the commission during budget time specifically talked about sidewalks on Woodland Drive, this section in yellow, from Terrace up to Ridgeview. And designated a little bit of money in the budget to be used in consideration for installing sidewalks in this area. So the next steps per the policy would be to have the municipality send letters to these 18 residents that have properties where sidewalks would be installed. There's legal agreements that have been reviewed by the solicitor that the residents should, or per the policy, would enter into. And then that would enable them to take advantage of the cost sharing formula in the policy where, I'm gonna use rough numbers, the municipality pays about 90% of the cost of sidewalk installation. The residents pay about 10% plus cost for removal of any structures or anything else that might be in the right of way, because we're not paying for that if there's private structures within the right of way. So generally speaking, that's how the policy works. This is kind of just an update. I gave the commission a draft of the letter to go out to residents. That's been also reviewed by the solicitor and the manager. So if the commission had any questions, I just wanted to kind of have this all in front of the group. If you would all take a look at it, if you want to say, because this, sidewalk installation is generally not something that happens in the winter time because concrete doesn't usually get poured in the winter. So if the commission wanted to put a certain timeline on this, we don't have a timeline on it. I wanted to let you all have that discussion and provide some additional direction. Plus, I wanted you all to be aware of what was happening before you started getting phone calls of, hey, I got this letter from the municipality that says I don't have to pay all this money for sidewalks. What do I do? So with that, turn it over to the group for some feedback and discussion.
I think we definitely need to set it at that way. Do you recommend a month turnaround? Is there kind of a suggestion of a letter goes out, come back? Give people 2 weeks, 4 weeks, what's the suggested timeline?
I think a month would be good. I think 2 weeks would be too short of a turnaround for people. But I think a month would work.
So let's go with proposed.
Mr. Seeker,
Yes.
you have thoughts on sidewalks. Would you like to share with us your thoughts on this process? Putting you on the spot. I know. No, I mean, I think I think we have a process that's laid out. We were discussing a little bit earlier whether or not we could change the process. Just like some feedback.
Yes, I'm quite a fan of sidewalks. And we are touted as quite a walkable community. Very rarely are we referred to as a drivable community. People don't tend to cite that. I do think it is important. I think I find it problematic that roads are always covered. We always pay for roads no matter what, and we don't ever ask the property owners to. Well, I won't get into that, but I think we're a little more automatic with roads and road repair, and we should be, sidewalks should get the same treatment. More people walk than drive, more people use sidewalks than drive, and I think as a community that's trying to, both, cater, I think that it's part of our future. I think it's healthy. I think it's better for, neighbors and a sense of community in general, that sidewalks are incredibly important and that we should do more to, have them everywhere. They should, everywhere that there's a road, there should also be a place to walk. If that's what you were looking for.
Process. What did you think of this process? For a little more.
But I went down the wrong path.
That's okay. No, it's all right.
Went down the wrong sidewalk.
I'm kind of new to how this is going.
Well, then I'll call Mr. Grella.
My opinion on sidewalks in general?
No, your opinion on the process. We passed this process, but,
Yeah,
what do you think in your heart of hearts?
so my general comment, which I said before, is if we're trying to fix what we do with sidewalks related to making safe, walkable routes, right? We start with schools because we can't do everything all the time. Can't do all the things, so we have to start somewhere. I don't know the wisdom in starting in, small little chunks and doing house by house kind of stuff. So I know we can't bite off everything. I would rather see us figure out what is the one route that we don't have that we can do the entire route. So start at the school and work backwards. If we start at the school and we could work back 500 feet, great. If we can work back 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet, great. Figure out what that number is. We had, I think it was seven proposals. The one that was in my ward was probably the most expensive, which, we went back and did some edits to because it just didn't make sense the way it was worked out and where people actually walked because of hills. Like on a 2D map, it might make sense, but we live in a 3D world. So I think rather than doing, little segments and saying, because then kids have to go back and walk in the street or walk on people's lawns again. So what I would rather see done is start with the school, work backwards for a good chunk based on those, the ones that we identified, which I thought was a good report in terms of where we needed those safe walking routes. And then we just need to fund them. So like now we're talking, I don't remember the total amount for this, right? But, I would rather see more money go to fixing the entire route and do one of them rather than to do multiple partial routes or have 200 feet of a sidewalk stop because it doesn't get to the whole school and then have them walk in the street for another 200 feet.
Understood.
I say that recognizing that this all comes back to a budget process. And, when we say, we're gonna fix a stairway for 200 grand and not do something else, these are all decisions we make as a commission, right? So like all of these things come to us and we say, hey, we're gonna put an extra $900,000 into public art or, finishing phase 2 or whatever we're calling it now, phase 3 of the Uptown. When we make a decision to do one thing, it's a decision against something else by its nature. So, that's my opinion. When we actually get there or don't, that's all of us deciding, we're not gonna spend $1 million on sidewalks, we're gonna spend 400,000 on sidewalks. So it's the reality of our budget process.
All right, better understanding the question and hearing Commissioner Grills. Yeah, I think it should be, yes, I very much agree that we should prioritize, those that are most needed, and certainly around schools and those safe routes and places where we already know it's risky, but I also think we should get in the habit of just building more continuous, there's never debate
Every
on
year.
like, repairing roads. There's always a debate on whether to add sidewalks, and I don't think it should be debated. I think it should just be something that we budget every year and build a network of sidewalks and continue to treat them like road, what kind of condition they're. Again, we get, reports on what kind of conditions roads are in every year. We don't get the same with sidewalks, which I think is a bit wrongheaded. So I do think that this is would be a good policy to start building out the whole network.
And look, even this changes commission to commission, right? Because we do have those policies in our development guidelines. This commission sitting here right now, minus you two. Well, actually, you were there as an appointee, voted for a developer not to install sidewalks that were there in the code. So when people come to us and say, hey, I don't want to do these things because we have too deep of a slope, or I don't want to do these things because in reality, it's going to cost them too much money to do. And we as a commission say, that's all right, don't worry about it. That happens. It just happened within the last year. When we did it around the bank on Cochrane, Cedar. Developers didn't put sidewalks in on the side of the property.
Oh, on the.
It was a request that we as a commission could have said, no, you got to put them in. So even when we have rules, this commission finds ways to let them not do those things. So, process, budget, even our own rules that we go back on. It's votes that we here in this room take, that we have to look at that stuff and decide, does it actually matter? And that changes from time to time. Sometimes we look and we go, hey, we have a lot of resident complaints that say tree trimming is really important. So we put an extra 100,000 to tree trimming. I don't think it's right or wrong, just it's what we as a body have the will to do that particular year.
So on the point, sorry, Commissioner Flynn, I see you have, to say, but what Commissioner Grella mentioned about around schools, so right here where my mouse is 710, this is Faulkner Elementary. So there are sidewalks coming down Vermont to Woodland, and then this section between Vermont and MacArthur has sidewalks on it. So if the commission wanted to look at extending from the school down, the next couple sections would be this MacArthur to Wainwright, Wainwright to Eisenhower, Eisenhower to Ridgeview. The portion you discussed before is the one that's in yellow down here from Paris up to Ridgeview. But if you wanted to work in the opposite direction from the school downwards, those would be kind of the blocks you were looking at.
I think it's important to remember, though, that the residents really want the lower part of Woodland done first because it's so dangerous. And if they get up to Ridgeview, they can turn onto Ridgeview and then onto Hoodridge, which is totally sidewalked to get to school. Now, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I agree, you know, we can get into this discussion about how people walk, and that's a little out of the way to do it that way.
Right.
So will people really do that, or will they continue down Woodland on the street that doesn't have sidewalks?
Kids will never do that. They'll walk through yards before they go around.
So will I.
So do I. I mean, I was gonna say, I do that too. It's a right away. I just walk right through it. But, yeah,
But I'll just lay it out there.
yeah, go ahead.
I think that the stuff in yellow just needs to get done. Right? This
Yeah.
process is fine, right? Because it's the process we have. To Commissioner Grello's point and to Commissioner Siegler's point. Yes, I think we do need to think more holistically about the right of way. I think I've been saying that for, I don't know how long.
Mhm.
Been a while.
Yeah, I've been on that path, for a while. The active transportation plan is coming.
Mhm.
That is an important piece of this puzzle to be thinking about how does this all fit together? The mobility board is now in place. This is a topic that I want them to be actively thinking about. Because yes, we do think about roads holistically. Sidewalks are more tactical. That is just the nature of the way it has developed over the years, right? There are legal precedents, there are a whole variety of factors that have to be taken into account. Building a more robust process is going to take time beyond what we're doing now. And it will take a lot of rethinking in terms of finances,
Right.
which is not a simple exercise. So yes, it needs to happen. But yes, it needs to be done diligently, and I think we're on the right path there. But I think this commission has said we want to do these streets. We have updated the policy to be more proactive, and we have budgeted this money to do it. Let's move forward, and see how it plays out.
How much should we budget?
I believe it was 270, give or take, a little bit. And yes,
So just looking at this, if we decide to do this in the yellow part,
Mhm.
let's talk real numbers. What's the cost of the municipality? What, if any, is the cost to the residents along that route?
excuse me, probable opinion of cost in engineering terms, that we had worked off of, was that the cost to the municipality was about two hundred and seventy that we budgeted. And then the total cost to the residents, I think there's 18 homes along this stretch, was about 1,300, give or take, or I'm sorry, 13,300. So,
Is that per home? Is that
no, that's
total?
total split up amongst the 18. And once we get the actual bids in, then we'll know kind of house by house what each one costs based on the linear frontage, because as you can see from the map, some of these properties have a much wider frontage versus a much smaller frontage. Properties on the corner are gonna need ADA ramps, so, each property is gonna be kind of its own unique
We
animal.
put in the ADA ramps. Am I not correct in saying that? The
Correct.
Municipality does? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanna
Um,
make sure that.
yeah, but in the total project cost
Yes,
and
yeah,
length
sure.
of sidewalk, I guess, so just to pick a couple examples here, but,
The total project cost, not to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Probable opinion of cost,
yes.
$283,000.
Give or take, I believe that's correct. Let me go back here to,
I got Matt wanting to check something out. Go ahead.
And I'll just
Yeah,
add,
283, yeah.
so that number is reflective only of the actual sidewalk installation. Does not
Include
include,
engineering.
well,
Okay.
and it doesn't include
Hmm.
anything that exists in the right of way that needs to be removed,
Okay.
right?
Do we have it, I would assume we've got some kind of as-built on utilities and stuff like that and understanding of that, or not yet?
I was gonna say, I'll defer, I don't know that we're that far in the process yet.
I think preliminary at this point, so I don't think we don't have that level of detail on the overall plans.
I think when John from Gateway did the analysis, there was, because he broke it out by sidewalk cost and project cost. So those numbers, the 283, that is total project cost,
Mhm.
not just sidewalk cost. But the numbers for what the homeowners pay their percentage of is based off just the sidewalk portion. So, yeah, but that is the breakdown, the 270 to the municipality, 13 to the property owners. But like, if you look down here, 10 Woodland Drive here has a very long frontage
Yeah,
on the street
yeah.
versus 12 and 14 have much shorter
Right,
frontages.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
once we actually have the per lot cost and breakdown, we kind of have estimate numbers and averages right now,
Mhm.
but, so it sounds to me like the commission wants to move this forward.
Mhm.
So what we can do from a process standpoint is we can send the letter, see how many agreements we get back in. And then, I can update the group again in a month's time after the deadline. And then if the commission wants to, nothing in the policy that was approved last year forgoes the ability the commission has under chapter 15, part 2 of the code to just order sidewalks in by resolution. So if the commission wanted to, at that point, once we see how many people agree to the cost sharing, let's say, 15 of the 18 agree and you have 3 holdouts, the commission still has the ability, my understanding, solicitor can correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is the commission could order these sidewalks in, and then those other 3 properties would just have to pay the full cost of the installation on their property and not be availed of the policy update where we pay 90% of the cost.
I think we're gonna need to talk about this and be real clear how we're gonna handle this, because this is gonna be a giant mess from a communication standpoint. So I think we need to be real clear, 1. 2, I think we need to be real clear with what that letter says. I think we owe it to the residents that they understand the timing of the decision and exactly how much they're gonna be charged, and the implications if they decide they don't wanna be part of it, or they just don't pay. So if they say, yeah, we're gonna pay, and then they just don't, then what are the implications of that? I think we need to be real clear with that. I'm just gonna give an example. I got a letter on Meridian Drive because Meridian Drive is one of the streets that's being done for reconstruction. And in that letter, I'm gonna paraphrase, it said, your street or a street nearby is gonna have construction. Like, that's not helpful. Like, is it my street or is it a nearby street? It helps to know because I wanna know if I can park there or not. So we need to be really detailed with what's in these letters going out. And I'm sure the solicitors will have comments about what we can or can't say legally or what we shouldn't say to cover our asses somehow. But I think we need to be really specific with what we put there. And we need to be really specific with the timing of what's gonna happen. And residents deserve to have that info.
There's a draft letter that we
Right here.
received, so the question is, if you look at the draft letter, it
Thanks.
says, please edit, or
Yeah.
it's okay.
I didn't have any problem with the letter, but I'll really be honest that I think we would have to have a community meeting with. Or it'll
That's a good
just,
question. I mean, would we be better off covering the full amount and just doing it? I mean, is that,
well, I mean, I think I asked that question. We could just go ahead and say we're gonna do it.
right, right, I mean, we're at 90%.
Put it in by resolution and just say it.
Right, and I think
Then,
removing
then
that
they're
last
supposed to
10%.
pay.
I think removing that last 10% match makes it a lot cleaner.
Well, I'm just gonna, and Bill's not here, Dan
Right.
wasn't here as we went through the process
Right.
for North Meadowcroft.
Mhm.
But there was a 90-10 arrangement on North
North
Meadowcroft.
Right.
If you're going to deviate from that now, do you
Mhm.
potentially open yourself up to
Okay.
those property owners coming back
Back
and
and
saying,
saying-
hey,
Right.
we had to pay 10%.
Mhm.
Why don't these property owners?
And there's a feeling, as I understand it from the real estate community, that if you live on a house, you live in a neighborhood with sidewalks, your houses go for more than houses that are in neighborhoods without sidewalks, right?
Yeah, but
I mean, it's hard
that,
to prove. You can't
that's-
prove something like that. but-
There's a value to it, certainly.
but that value is realized when you sell the property and don't live there anymore. So it's, you
No,
know,
I mean, I
like,
would suggest you get some value while you live there. I mean, you don't,
Yeah.
not the monetary value, but sort of the quality, you know, the
but
addition.
we take, like, we don't charge people on quality. We charge people on actual price, especially for the sidewalks, right? So it's like, that sidewalk can increase the value of their property $1 million. It doesn't really do anything. They're still gonna have to pay 10% or whatever.
Right,
the
but
cost
it's an amenity too, that they get, and a discounted, it is severely discounted.
Definitely.
And it may vary, you know, as we heard, that this is for the residents want to have the work done. Because they see as saying, this beats more.
Yep.
Because it's on a curve as opposed to someone saying, about a dead end, there's a straightaway, we're not on a sidewalk anymore. So vary from street to street. I think just to get this going, I mean, if this letter is okay, and yes, I'm sure there's a resident meeting that'll be required to start to say, okay, this is a pilot project or whatever. Let's get going. It's summer, if we can get this going, we can be pouring concrete this summer.
I don't have any problem with this. I don't have any problem with the process. We went
Okay.
through the process for a long
Right.
time and I
And
think it's
Andrew
good.
doesn't either.
The,
Okay.
there's. My concern is in the schools and the safe walking routes to schools. There are many areas and there are many residents who have requested sidewalks that have nothing to do with access routes to schools, where I think that policy really comes into play and makes a ton of sense. Where I could see us deviating on a case-by-case basis is this has become a problem area for whatever reasons, cultural reasons. Instead of having one car, families have 4 cars now and there's much more traffic, or it's just a dangerous curve. I think there are reasons, and we've changed our policy or deviated from policy, in my opinion, for a lot less than that. I don't see that it would be a problem to deviate. I don't have an issue here.
Okay. Good.
I'm great.
All
And
right, Ian.
I'll look at that letter in the next 24 hours. I can look
Okay,
at it.
that would be great.
I'll get
Yes,
you those
because,
ready.
Ian, we will discuss further about meeting, because I think that's probably better part of valor.
Yeah.
All where full of process.
I think that's smart. That's
I
your work.
recommend the meeting,
That's work.
by the best too, but the meetings.
Well, I think it is. I mean, you know, a letter is one thing. You can read a lot of things into letters that frankly aren't at all what the letter implies, and, so.
Well, that also just
would
so
also-
also sure not how they reach out,
It
whatever.
would also allow staff to assemble sort of a list of questions that were asked at that public meeting. And then
Sure.
provide
And you have
back.
it, yeah,
Good
wonderful.
Group.
Yeah, that's a
For
positive
anybody that
outcome.
can't attend or just.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So in that case, we'll look at our calendar, see if we want to plan, have a community meeting date. If we do, I can put the date of that in the letter before I send it out. I'll wait to hear
Fabulous.
back from Commissioner Grella if he has any comments on the letter. And so since the commission seems to want to move on this, when do you want the letter sent out? Like next week, beginning of next week? To give Commissioner Grella time to give feedback?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
send it out.
I'll give you that in the next 24 hours.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks. I'll look forward to
Great.
it.
We'll look at our calendars for
Okay.
community meeting.
Yeah, which
Amongst the
probably
three
should
of us.
be before the 1 month deadline, so people can get
Yes.
there. Yeah,
And the 1 month deadline goes in.
I will add that in as well.
The question I have for the commission, which is not related to Woodman Drive,
Mhm.
is when do we pick up review of those other 6 properties, those other 6 routes? Like presumably we would do that on an annual basis and just keep going until we knock them down.
I wonder if it's important, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we did have, Chief Haberman did a count on Kelso Road, a pedestrian count, is that correct? Am I
The
saying?
vehicle, speed, we deployed our speed electronic
Pedestrian
sign,
crossing.
our
The
pedestrian.
pedestrian crossings, because it was amazing how few children walk. Was it something like 4 a
Yeah,
day?
it was very few.
It was almost none,
Mhm.
which, you know, that's the old chicken and egg. If they had sidewalks,
Right.
would more of them walk? I get it, but
We could still drop
but
it down
we
in
could
priority.
still, we could drop it down in priority, so maybe we think about what our process is. Do we want to do pedestrian counts on those roads to start getting a feeling for which ones jump up in priority?
So it's
That-
it's on
Go
the
ahead.
municipal planner also.
Yeah.
Um,
And we're planning for
and
you.
the planning office does coordinate the capital improvement program.
Yes,
And in my other hat of being the assistant manager, I've been doing orientation for all our new advisory boards.
right.
One of the tasks of the mobility board is to provide, actually of every board, is to provide annual priority lists that go into the capital improvement plan. And my thought was, and I did mention this when I talked to the mobility board, that they should look at that list of potential sidewalk installations and incorporate that into their capital plan priority lists for the commission, so that the commission can take that under consideration,
In
as
your
part of the
mobility?
capital program.
And with the reasons for why they chose them, I think would be important. Because if we want to counter, we want to have facts and figures.
I would agree. I would say that we're also, as Commissioner Flynn did reference, going to be doing the active transportation plan, which
Yes.
would be another piece. And Chief Haberman and I had a conversation of those safe walking routes to schools
Yeah.
were done a while ago. I think it's probably good to revisit those.
Right.
We would also have the benefit of, you know, a collaborative conversation with the school district, probably a few months from now, once they work through where they currently are, to again, take sort of a holistic
Mm-hmm.
view of, you know, where the gaps are, where the priorities are,
Mhm.
and then try to come up with an implementation that makes sense.
I would also suggest kind of following Mr. Sigler's, idea that the CIP and all that, so as we think about the budget, as we're preparing the budget in the fall and obviously to drop for November first, the idea of some number
For sidewalks every
for
year.
sidewalks.
Yeah.
Obviously, commission will discuss it, but I mean, the idea of just thinking about some set aside.
Every year that we want to add it as a budget item.
Yeah.
Okay. Great discussion.
Thank you. I really fumbled your question though. I feel bad.
Well, you don't have.
You weren't even here for the sidewalk
Yeah.
policy discussion.
I'm still trapped.
And she threw you right under the bus with that
Well,
question.
I didn't mean to, but
He's looking down, it's like,
we,
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Oh, no.
we've had many discussions about sidewalks and I thought, okay, now throw Jeff the chance to talk about sidewalks. He looks up like,
It looked like he was paying attention to
Like,
class.
I'm sorry. So. All right,
Thank you.
okay. Mr. McGill, it's your turn.
It is my turn.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of background. Last year, as we went through budget workshops, we were discussing engineering fees. And the question came up of what is our policy on how often we go out for bid for what I've termed our ongoing recurring professional services.
Mhm.
Essentially, that's our general legal, general engineering, traffic, labor council, and financial auditing. We do professional services a lot as one-time contracts for the comp plan, active uptown, any number, but those five are really the ones that we have consistently year in, year out. So we don't have a policy. Interestingly enough, when I started calling my colleagues in other communities, really, most of them don't have a policy either.
Well, there we go.
They've typically done what we've done, and that's periodically when there's an issue or when the question gets asked, they will go out and do an RFP and request responses and move forward that way. I also wanted to stress that, this request wasn't because there's any dissatisfaction with current services. It was more about what I've termed sort of verifying the market. No different than what we do with a salary study.
Sure.
For employees here. We go out to market typically about every 5 years and say, hey, are we still in line with market in terms of how we're compensating our employees? Much the same here. Are we still in line with what we are paying for those respective services? So I went ahead and sort of took my attempt at putting together a draft policy that gives you a little bit in terms of the background, the purpose of the policy, which is really to establish that systematic and consistent process for when we should go to market for these types of services. Also gives you an objective and then runs through a list of requirements you'll see that in the list of requirements, I gave you some suggested dates and you can pick whatever dates you are. I'll give you the rationale behind some of my suggested dates. For general legal, we have the zoning ordinance update that the commission essentially is committed to doing in 2025. So it's probably not a good time to be going out for either engineering or general legal, just because
Right.
you'll want that institutional knowledge, I would
Right.
imagine,
Mhm.
as part of that zoning ordinance update. Labor Council, 2027, really. We have police contract that's up in 2025, Public Works is up in 2026, and fire's up in 2027. So, again, these dates are just merely suggestions. You can alter them as you see fit. The traffic engineering, we have the active transportation plan that will be done this year, so that was another reason for the 2026 date. And for the auditor services, we have a current contract, 3-year contract that is up at the end of 2025. So 2026 would be the earliest you could
Can do it.
really go out
Right.
with it.
Sure.
In terms of other requirements, having them not exceed a term of 5 years. That doesn't commit you to changing consultants every 5 years. It just says that every 5 years, you're gonna go back out to market. I will caution you that the last time we did this, well, it's been the last time, but when we did it for the solicitor, I was actually the one that drafted that RFP. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work in terms of the respondents, for them to pull together a response. I think we had 12, that we shortlisted down to 5. We landed with Buchanan Ingersoll, but there's a time commitment there. So in my history, just for, background for the commission, legal, since I've been here, which is 27 years now, we've had 2 firms, Eckert Siemens, and then Buchanan Ingersoll, 2010.
That sounds about right.
Traffic, we've had 3. We had Wooster and Associates, Trans Associates, and then Gateway. General engineering, we've only had 2, was Vegler Ramsey.
Right.
For
And then
a
Gateway.
long time.
Sure.
Gateway actually bought Vegler Ramsey's
Mhm.
book of business.
I
And
remember that.
we now have Gateway. For audit, I do not recall anyone other than Meyer Dussel, quite honestly. And for labor, we've had Campbell Durant for, again, as long as I can remember, but there may have been somebody else. I just wasn't involved at that level, that far back, so. So I went through again and tried to put together everything that we would want to see in terms of what should be in those proposals. Everything from basics of contract information, 1, 3, and 5-year rate proposals, executive summary, staffing plan, some qualifications in terms of what we want to see from respondents. 8 years, and again, you can change a number that just seemed to, again, be a good number in terms of what we want from the experience. Performing municipal and township work, because it is kind of a little bit of a niche market, if you will. And importantly, that would be in the state of Pennsylvania, because we have different rules and regulations here than some of the neighboring states. Again, monthly reporting, references from 3 similar sized municipal clients, information about if they're currently engaged or a defendant in any litigation over and above a certain amount, ongoing investigations, conflicts of interest, and then procedures as how we would move that forward. So as was discussed during that budget workshop, when the commission says, yeah, we want to put together an RFQ, RFP, staff will also take a step to determine what, if any services could be performed in-house. I'm gonna go out on a limb and tell you if it's illegal, probably not any, unless you want to hire an in-house counsel. But for certain other, from an engineering standpoint, if there are communities that use a split of an outside engineering firm and an in-house engineer to do
Sure.
inspections for road projects, those types of things, so we could look at that. We'd also have staff give you a list of those services and as long as, along with an estimate of the cost, have it done by a municipal employee, and do sort of a cost benefit analysis in terms of how does that shake out between scope of services. In addition to what we would put in the scope, we do have requirements in the Humboldt Charter, which I gave you in Article 6 and Article 7 for the solicitor and engineer for things that must be in there. And then we'll prepare a memo with the draft RFP, RFQ detailing the process, justification for the approach, an evaluation of existing professional services, the cost of those services, what the effect would be of switching providers, including the institutional knowledge and ongoing items, and an estimate as to the number and quality of responses that we would expect to see. And then as Dan referenced earlier, I tried to include Phil's general language in terms of if you don't like it, you don't have to follow it.
Got it.
So
Make up your own minds.
again, this is a draft. I know you guys just got it in your packets. Well, I think I presented to you. Open to any changes, suggestions you want to see. And some of the neighboring communities said that if we enact or adopt one, they'd like a copy.
Because they want to do it of your work. Yeah, got it.
Well, as I think the one that probably did the poking to ask how this process works. And
See, I blocked it out of my mind, but now you went right back to the top again.
Yeah, I know, I'm the problem child. But also working with lots of municipalities that do this, I really think it is a fantastic approach. If for no other reason than just to give everybody the chance to ask the question, is this how we want to continue forward?
Right.
The answer may be yes, and that is completely acceptable. But if you don't ask the question and if electeds aren't prompted to ask that question and have a framework for doing so, I think, things can get missed. Sometimes change is important and, having this impetus to at least think about it and reflect on it, I think is important to institutionalize that process. I have, as you said, looked at it. I haven't had a lot of time to reflect on it or look at other competing examples, but I think the gist of it, I'm in full agreement and I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, if you can find other competing examples, please share them with me because I searched and really wasn't able to find too many. Sure.
So you would have to do this every 5 years? Is that what it lays
Let's-
out?
What it's, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought,
Every
yeah.
5 years, you go back out to market. And again, you don't have to change. It's just
No,
a
I know.
question.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes time to do it every 5 years too. I wonder if that's
It does.
too frequent.
Well, and that's why I tried to sort of stagger these in terms of
Yeah.
when you're doing.
That's all.
Is there any, because I appreciate Commissioner Flynn's going, something to say, hey, you thinking about this? But does it have to be automatic spend the money? Because let's say there's something happening, we go, staff time is what it is, could we think about doing the
Right,
RFP the year
right,
following
yes,
or
yeah.
something? But I like just, there's something to say, hey, there's like a tickler in your
Mhm,
calendar to say, think about this year.
mhm.
So I guess my point is there any optional language in here to say, we want to have something to think about, but we may just have to, another one is fill clauses of going, subject to current circumstances and can be modified to delay or something like that, depending on.
At the bottom of page 3.
Yeah, I believe that gives you the, I'll say, flexibility. To, again, modify from a time standpoint when you decide to do full thing.
Well, if we haven't done it very frequently in the past, I wonder if we just say we do it every 10 years, devil's advocate, every 8 years. Just thinking about everything on staff's plate. And Mr. Grella, for one, was extremely upset, I'd say it would be the right word, about not being able to do the zoning ordinance this year because of staff capacity. So this adds to staff tasks. Is everybody comfortable with 5 years? You want to bump it out to 8 years? Do you care? Opening it up for discussion. Thoughts?
If it's a 5-year contract, I feel like it has to be in elements of 5.
Well, I mean, you
That's
can
fine.
change it to 10 or whatever number.
That's my point, 5,
Yeah.
10, 15, whatever is supposed to 8, that's.
I mean, you always have this, if someone is not performing, I mean, I think that there's that, and if you're not performing, we go out right away.
Yes.
And I purposely wrote into the requirement, Steve, number 2, that we're going to ask for 1, 3, and 5-year rate proposal.
Right, I saw that,
So again,
Right.
there's nothing that locks you into a
Full
5-year
5, right.
contract.
so we do 8,
You've been, you know,
5 grade.
I mean, look, we have different term contracts. And we look at those things and there are reasons that we do different term contracts for some of these. I think I look at this more as an accountability thing, really than anything else. Because the reality is, practically speaking, we have to vote on the budget every year. Whether, you know, I don't think we've ever reneged on a contract, but, you know, were we ever to get into a situation where we need to do that, we obviously have to stick with whatever the contract is. So if we, you know, somehow decide, all of us, to get out of a 5-year contract in year 2, we have to deal with the legal consequences of that, and that's not gonna change no matter what a policy says. So, you know, for me, this is really all about accountability. I don't have an issue with it.
You're
Well-
fine with every 5?
As I think about this, right, and I've done lots of this type of 5-year
Right.
cycles, right? You know,
sure.
municipal advisors oftentimes, to Mr. McCreary's point, you know, there are municipalities that retain municipal advisors
Mhm.
for a 5-year window,
Mhm.
right? And they will work on a 5-year cycle, and then you go out to RFP again, and you put the whole RFP together and you present it again. But that's also an opportunity for staff and electeds to reflect on what new things come to the table, right? If I don't have that opportunity to bring something new to the table, I'm getting the same same service I was getting before. And that's often perfect, right? But I don't know what else might be coming to the table, right? And that's, you know, going out to market, and sometimes it isn't just these services. This is the baseline that we assume we're looking for and making sure we're getting good things, but maybe there's something else out there that someone else is bringing to the table that is very compelling, and we don't see that if we don't, you know, have some framework. And the way I would think about this is, you know, much like with the comprehensive plan, you know, we have a kind of laid out schedule now. These things just need to layer in there as well. Again, does that mean those things have to happen on that? Of course not. But that's the baseline assumption, is that this is how we're gonna lay things out. And again, the goal isn't, you know, to micromanage the future. It's to create a structure so that staff are prompted to say, this is what we have coming. Commission, what do you think? Right? Is this where you want to be? We have concerns as staff. Maybe we want to push it forward. Maybe we want to bring it back. You know, but this is prompting that dialogue, which I think is really what's the most important, you know, piece of this puzzle.
I'm gonna make a suggestion, just to spitballing this. Instead of having sequential years, auditor service in 2026, along with traffic and engineering. The next year we're doing labor council. And then is it better to try and say auditor in 2025 and, or the next one 2027, next one 2029? And I throw more to Keith to say, does that provide a little bit more elbow room for staff to?
The reason, quite honestly, Steve, that I grouped general engineering with traffic is
Those two related, but
you will find
Same.
engineering firms that do both. You will also
Right.
find, quite honestly, law firms that offer not only general legal, but also will offer you labor
Labor
counsel.
counsel.
Agreed, I would just make the point of going, we
Oh, we
have,
can,
you know, where legal and labor are
yeah, you,
1 year after I've gone through the exercise of engineering, so the questions.
sure, you
For
can
staff
gap
time
them.
to say gap them with just a little bit more, to give staff to recover from the previous ROE process.
I mean, I said these were only sort of suggested dates.
Right.
The dates are
Right.
really just numbers at this point. You can make up whatever you'd like.
Kate, what's your opinion of this?
Well, the process?
Yeah, I mean, of the 5 years of,
Well, and again, using what we do for municipal employees,
Mhm.
I don't think it's ever a bad idea to check market, right? 5 years, I wouldn't recommend you do it any
Soon.
sooner than that.
Right.
If you want to push it to 7, Because the flip side of this is there's a cost to a respondent
That's right,
to put
absolutely.
these responses together. And if you do it too frequently and you don't change,
Mhm.
some people are gonna see it and go, you know what, they do this every 5 years, I'm not, and they stayed with whoever,
Right.
right?
Not gonna-
We're not
not
gonna spend
reply.
our time
Right.
to provide a response. So it's
Right.
finding a balance. I picked 5 because that's what we do with, in terms of salaries. It could be 7, it could be some other number. And to Steve's point, you don't have to do them
Right.
26, 27, 28. You could do 26, 28, 30. I mean, that's really commission decision in terms of how you want to do that.
So the other thing I would just throw out there, I think I'm open to the timing. I think 5 years works for me. But I'm flexible on that. But I would also put in any other professional services exceeding, right?
Certain amount.
Yeah, a certain amount. Just to add a broad bucket of, that, because yes, we're defining certain ones here because we know them now.
Mhm.
I don't know what's happening in the future.
I see.
Right, I don't know what professional services we will want in the future.
Sure.
The other thing I just noted, and it just was, kind of just hit me as we were sitting here going through this was, item number 9 was talking about if the defendant is in any legal, litigation involving a sum of $100,000 or more. $100,000 today is different than $100,000 10 years ago or $100,000 20 years, from now. I might play with that wording. I'm nitpicking, but it's one of those, in 40 years, right?
Point taken. And again, I was trying to, again, find that, I'll say,
Sure.
sweet spot
Yeah.
between.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you involved in any litigation? Because the answer probably is,
Of course we
yeah.
are.
But is it
Yeah.
really something that rises to the level? of
Yeah.
Right.
Substantial, so again,
I don't think that's good.
I'd go to 7 years instead of 5. I feel like we have so much on our plates. I think every 7 years is plus, and I also think that, if you're a law firm or an engineering firm, it does cost money to do these things. Let's not.
I don't know,
Spin wheels.
having done these for years, working at law firms, working at
Yeah.
advisory firms, everybody does them. You're used to doing them, you've got your base templates.
once, I was gonna say, and to be honest with you, I already have the template for the general legal.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I
Yeah.
potentially have one for labor council.
yeah.
Right.
I have one for traffic. So
We
again, these
will
are,
have them, right, and the respondents have, right,
right.
right?
We don't have to reinvent the wheel
Yeah.
here. for those.
And nor do they.
But it does take time. And again, a lot of that time comes in terms of, I'll say, follow-up,
Responses,
right?
Yes.
Because once you shortlist and you reach out to the
Mhm.
5, right? You are going to get some additional questions from those respondents. And it's a matter of taking the time, not only to provide the response, but then when the initial RFQ goes out, if you get questions, we historically have posted those questions and the responses to everybody
Sure,
so that they're
Yeah,
available, so
sure,
everybody's working
yeah.
off the same level
Right,
playing field.
right.
Same doesn't necessarily hold once you get into the
Right.
short list, but there is a certain amount of staff time.
Sure.
Excellent.
And that's why I suggested that I had just a bit more break time.
7 years.
Sure.
Well, no, I don't think 7 years, I was just thinking
I mean, the-
2025,
yeah.
2027, 2029, just to give staff a chance to. It may not be a 12-month process, maybe an 18-month process, next, you're tripping on the next contract that you should be looking to send out, so. Just give staff a chance to recover a little bit.
I've heard potentially 7 years and I've
Yeah.
heard potentially 2-year gap between,
Mhm.
is that, or do you want me to just circulate sort of an email tomorrow with, and have you, all of you get
Yeah,
back to me?
Sure.
in terms of- Because again, you're gonna see this again
Yeah.
in a public
Yeah, public thing, yeah,
setting
Yeah.
before you
sure,
vote on it.
right,
So,
sounds good.
Okay.
Has everybody looked at the future discussion session topics? Is there anything anybody needs to add, concerned about?
The invasive
Not
species.
necessarily a discussion section, topic other than we talked about. We're going to not have a session in the summer.
Oh, yeah,
Start
he,
thinking about what the, that's.
he's,
We've got two commissioners that are out the first
You and
meeting
I
in
are out.
July.
Okay.
So again, that's up to this group collectively. We can obviously have a meeting with three.
Mhm.
If there's another meeting in the summer that you would, we have, say historically, but more often than not, if we take a meeting off in the summer, it's usually the second meeting in August. That was in the past driven by a number of commissioners who had children that were going back
Yeah.
to school. So they needed to be there for that. But again, that's really up to the commission. What you want to do from a meeting standpoint.
I just want to make sure because it's not on a to-do list to figure that out.
It's on his, he knows.
I don't get a vote. I'm here every time, so. Anybody else think they have any issues with the first meeting in July? From attendance standpoint?
The ninth, no, not necessarily.
I'm one of the no's, but I don't.
I'm a no
I know
too.
you and Ann are not.
Yeah. I can't.
So it's the other.
Yep, you'll be here, you'll be here, you'll be, God willing, say.
Well, if it's here or Zoom, does that create any issues as far as three commissioners, or what is Zoom versus in the room? Is that? we have to check?
I can't zoom it though.
Phil changed.
I can't either. I
Yeah.
just was checking.
It won't be able to zoom, so. Normally,
All right, I will also circulate.
just to make sure, yeah.
I've reached the point with the second meeting in August where two kids are out of college and third goes, see ya. I get it.
Well, the other thing that will drive it, quite honestly, is to see what's on those agendas and how time sensitive. Those
Yeah,
items are.
sure, yeah,
So,
sure. Okay. Well, we only have 2 minutes, so I think we can. Anybody have anything burning they want to talk about of their commission liaison?
Ian did a great job.
Yes,
Ian did
Ian has done a
fantastic.
great
Yeah,
job.
That was it. Finance committee met and we got the Ian
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
And,
I get to enjoy it tomorrow.
All right.
Yay.
it's great. It's awesome.
don't spoil it.
Yeah. That's what the surprise.
Lots of questions. Give them a hard time.
School board is still in the middle of budget season.
Yeah.
The information for this year and last year's budget is on the school board website.
Right,
They are in the process of selling tickets for Meet Me in St. Louis.
yeah,
Which is pretty cool. And then so we're working on this, art project, public streetscape stuff.
yes,
And at the last meeting, when Eric presented, we talked about hooking up with the high school art teacher, which they really liked that idea. So we're just waiting for the school board to get back to us with the names of the art people who can be involved in that and can coordinate with Eric. And then they'll put high school and hopefully, lower school art involvement into that process, whatever that means. Like, let's get local artists, let's get kids, or even have them involved in, whatever it's gonna be, selection of, making art, murals. Just having our local school involved in that process is pretty cool. So they were excited about that, and we'll have some names for that hopefully pretty soon.
okay.
You're adjourned.
Next meeting.